CRAVE was conceived as a way to deliver our strong educational mission and our membership's desire for their continued learning. Through the CRAVE series, our chapter will deliver webinars and virtual meetings to deliver timely and relevant topics that are affecting our industry today.
It's about the effort that we expend to connect with people. But you have an opportunity to see people, you have an opportunity to chat with people. We may not have an opportunity to have appetizers and share a drink with each other, but we stay connected, and that's really the most important thing.
Being able to work together and learn together in a new format, a new environment, really helped us take those pre-existing relationships and friendships that I had to another level.
CoreNet has taken the leadership in these kinds of conversations for years and years, and so we're delighted to have this long-term relationship with CoreNet.
I found the CoreNet to be a great community of dedicated real estate professionals, and what it means to me is it gives me a wider network of people with whom to share ideas, to derive the best learnings, to test and experiment with things that I'm working on.
This program is all about personal growth and becoming the leader that you want to be.
CoreNet has always led the way when it comes to supporting the professional development of our members. Our roundtable discussions, our education workshops, and our professional development programs are just part of what makes CoreNet so valuable to our members. It was critical for us to find a way to still be able to facilitate all of this. CRAVE has provided us the platform to be just as effective and to still provide that value to our members in a virtual environment.
CoreNet not only provides a platform for different groups to come together regardless where you come from in terms of organization, but really help each member to feel like they belong in this organization.
We have a diverse membership base, and you will find that members come from all walks of life and from all over the world. However, it's still an area of focus for us to improve upon and to embrace equity, inclusion, and diversity through increasing awareness and taking action, as we know this will lead to more success for the organization and for our members.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jill Blanco, and I help manage CoreNet New England along with our executive director, Karen Hood. Thank you all for joining us. I am here to kick off this CoreNet Real Access Virtual Education, or CRAVE webinar, company culture, employee retention, and collaboration in the age of the hybrid work. This is brought to you by the Education Committee. Today's panelists will explore how leaders in the industry are working to keep their employees engaged now and in the future of the hybrid workplace. Before we start the program, I want to share a few things. This is a webinar and all attendees are on mute. Let me just go back this way. So our agenda for today, you just watched the CRAVE video. Now we're doing the welcoming and opening remarks. I'll introduce the panelists, they'll have a discussion, and then we will do some Q&A at the end. This meeting will end promptly at 1 p.m. This webinar will also be recorded and will be shared on the CoreNet New England YouTube channel following the event. Please enter any questions in the Q&A section located at the bottom of your screen. Our team will be monitoring this throughout the webinar. And now some upcoming events. So we have a Real Advantage workshop tomorrow titled Future of Work. That will be another noon event 12 to 1. We have the 2022 Career Strategy Series Part 2, Flow Over Balance, Working with Our Nature. And that will be with Dr. Kabibi Springs on January 27th. We have Leading from Within, DEI Leadership and Implementation with Dr. Dwanita Mosby-Tyler. That will be on February 2nd from 4 to 5. Our next event is the importance of workplace age equity across the spectrum. That will be February 8th from 12 to 1:15. And we also have our annual ski trip planned in Waterville Valley Resort for February 18th. Be sure to stay up to date on all CoreNet New England news, events, and updates through our social media channels. Take a moment to take a photo of the QR codes on the screen and join us on Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. If you have any questions or want to learn more, please reach out to the email address that I will put in the chat in a moment. All of our events and programs are made possible by our CoreNet New England sponsors. So many thanks to all of our sponsors. On the screen, you will see the corporate partners. On the next screen, we have our platinum sponsors, our gold sponsors, and silver sponsors. So now we're going to get started. I am happy to introduce our panelists for this afternoon. So we have Mike Coons, VP of Workplace Advisory from Colliers, Beth Chulas, VP Real Estate and Workplace Experience with Toast, and Michael Powers, Director, Employee Experience and Communication, also with Toast. And now I will pass it off to the three of you to get started.
Amazing. Thanks, Jill. And thanks to the New England chapter of CoreNet for having me here today. As Jill said, my name is Mike Coons. I'm a vice president in Colliers Workplace Advisory Group. I sit in New York City, but I have responsibility for the Northeast, including Boston and the surrounding region. I've been with Colliers for a little under a year, but I've been doing this kind of work in workplace strategy for the better part of a decade. The work that we do at Colliers is basically about helping organizations align their business objectives with their people, and then making sure that the space and the technology is there to establish the best productivity and employee engagement. So really about making the work a productive and engaging place to be. I began my career doing similar exercises with the architecture firm Gensler shortly after I finished graduate school. I think the world has changed significantly, that particular world of workplace strategy in the last 10 years or so. And not strictly because of the last 2 years in the pandemic, though it's certainly accelerated, I think, some of the trends that we're here to talk about today, namely a kind of increased employee agency and sort of role that I think individual contributors and general employees of organizations have in shaping the workplace experience that best suits what it is that they need to do. When I finished my time at Gensler, I moved to the occupier side. I went to a company called Mondelez in the consumer packaged goods world, where I kind of had a crash course in some of the hard truths that corporates wrestle with in terms of figuring out how to manage their portfolio. So a lot of the thinking that I had done about making sure that the space was exactly right for employees was then tempered just a little bit by some of the challenges in terms of managing budgets at the scale of a multinational organization. Great experience. And from there, I kind of tried to knit together both of those experiences, workplace consulting and then corporate real estate, at a flex office provider called Notel, an erstwhile provider, but the general value proposition was workplace or space as a service, and I was responsible for workplace globally, trying to find the sort of quickest line to developing productive, engaging, as I said, workplace experiences for companies of all sizes on a more flexible platform. So since that time, I've joined Colliers. I've returned a little bit to working with individual companies about how to tailor those programs. But as I mentioned, it's in a very different environment and one that makes these experiences really, really interesting. My role today, largely as moderator, the stars of the show are my colleagues, Beth and Michael from Toast. We'll be talking a little bit about what's a really, really interesting case study in managing through some of the transitions of the last 2 years. But I'm excited to hear both, again, as we've talked, and for everybody on the call to hear kind of the origins of some of their successes and where they might be able to leverage that, because it's a really interesting tale. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Beth for an introduction. She'll introduce her colleague Michael as well, and they'll take it from there. Looking forward to the discussion, guys.
Take myself off mute. That would be helpful as we get through this discussion. And for everyone on the call, Michael and I are so thrilled to be here to talk about the Toast story. It is, I can say, with full, passion, this is probably my favorite role that I've ever had in my entire tenure of working in corporate real estate. And I know Michael and I have been through so much over the last 2 years, especially as we started off with the pandemic. And I will tell you, when we initially closed down our offices, we fully expected it to be for a few weeks. And here we are 2 years later, still struggling to open up our offices and bring our toasters back into the office. So we'll talk a lot more about what that journey was all about over the last years. And I've been privileged to be part of an amazing group of toasters that have just leaned way in on helping to bring connectedness through our company, through all of this. So super excited to talk a little bit more about that. Just a little bit about my background. I am a lifelong corporate real estate professional. I have had roles in both technology companies and very mature financial services, Bank of America, Capital One, Fidelity, most recently before Toast, and decided as I left Fidelity that it was time for me to look for something different and exciting. And I say that Toast and I found each other at exactly the right time when Toast was going through their phase of hypergrowth and scalability. And I brought a lot of experience to help through that journey with them. And it's been an amazing couple of years through the pandemic, growth, slowing down with everything happening in the restaurant industry. And now we're back in that space of growing again. So I have with me Michael Powers. He leads all of employee experience for Toast. And our teams, I can truthfully say, literally have been joined at the hip over the last couple of years. And I think the success story that you're going to hear today is in large part due to that partnership that we have and how closely these teams have collaborated through this process. And I know for all of us in corporate real estate, we always talk about how important the alignment, how important the integration is, how important the connection is back with people, HR, and employee experience. But I am here to tell you that we at Toast actually, I think, very successfully have achieved that over the last couple of years. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Michael and let him talk a little bit about his background.
Absolutely. Thank you, Beth. And I would definitely echo that sentiment. I think that the partnership that we've been able to build and how that drives that forward just showcases every day what we're trying to do for our toasters, which is what we call our team and our employees, and how we build that community. And it's been quite an adventure. Hi everyone. My name is Michael Powers. I've been at Toast for about 4 years now. My background's actually slightly different. I'm a lifetime marketer. I went to school for hospitality and tourism management. I was a hospitality guy growing up. I loved all of that, the service element to it, how you drive that forward with your customers or your guests, and what that can mean from just like a level of service and hospitality overall. Turned that passion into communications and marketing and building memorable brand experiences for people and creating demand for companies across the board. I've worked for a few different tech companies throughout my tenure here. And then similar story for Beth, like I feel like the stars aligned and I was able to join my passion for hospitality with my background in marketing and joined Toast 4 years ago as our director of field marketing. In that role, I spent a lot of time really thinking about how do we take our corporate message and think about what that means for a specific region and how we can help our sales team message our product out in a different way, or hear the problems that were happening in those specific regions and then be able to transition that message, transition that product to them so that they can increase their overall funnel. As time continued, I became that culture captain across Toast, thought about engagement, communications, of course, and how we continue to drive that. We created a role around the employee experience function and was one that I was more than delighted to be able to move into and take a lot of that background around how do we think about what's happening and how can we fix it? What are we seeing? What are we hearing? And how can we drive programs, engagement factors, as well as improve our overall communication function to drive that connectedness and increase engagement overall for our toasters, especially as we continue to grow both in the US and internationally, and what we can do to continue to make this one of the best places to work and a career defining company for every single person who works here. So I've been doing this for about 2 years now, and it's been probably one of the toughest times to start this role, but honestly has been super exciting for me because I feel like I'm able to lean in with these great partnerships to solve these problems now, and hopefully it's smooth sailing after this.
Yep. Awesome. Yeah. So what we thought we'd start off with doing, guys, is just giving you a little bit of an overview of who Toast is as a company. For those of you in the Northeast and specifically in the Boston area, you've probably heard of the company, a little bit about the company, but we've got the classic scrappy startup story of a couple of MIT grads that went out to solve a problem and built an amazing company in the process. And so our company was founded in 2011. And we have grown to over 2,700 plus employees, and we're still growing beyond that right now. We're so happy to say. We've got offices internationally now in Dublin. We've got offices in Boston, in Chicago, in Omaha, and San Francisco as well. So the other really big important part of Toast, which is why you're going to hear a lot about our culture and why we were so successful through this process. We have probably about 40% of our employees right now that are in a remote or field type role, which means they're not associated with one of our offices. So we were already in that remote hybrid type working mode, even pre-pandemic as we went into this space. But business model is one where we're a very mission, values, and purpose-driven company. It has been who we are from the get-go. And I think it's what allowed us to lean in so much on this. Our mission is to really help our customers delight their guests, do what they love, and thrive. And we've taken that theme into workplace and into employee experience, because we firmly believe that if our employees, especially those that are in roles of customer and client facing, that we need to help them to be their best authentic selves every day when they come to work. And so we really truly believe that we're here to support all of them. So in terms of the products and services that we deliver, we've got, for those of you that have gone to a restaurant anytime in the last few years, chances are that you've leveraged the Toast restaurant technology platform. So we are a full stack offering for our restaurant customers, all the way through, supply chain, inventory management, through helping them with HR and payroll products and services, through point of sale, and on to marketing and guest products and services. And I will tell you that the pandemic just really showcased, I believe, how important technology is to our restaurants. And what we've discovered through the process is those of our customers that were really leveraging the Toast platform, we're able to survive the last couple of years. And that was something that was a real focus for us. We knew the restaurant industry was going to be hit very hard. And our company was also needed to adjust pretty quickly. But we shifted from this idea of helping them to thrive, right? We in the industry back, but we knew that in the early days, March, April, May, June of 2020, we needed to really shift and help them with products such as curbside delivery, ordering and pay at the table. Some of these Toast delivery services that are out there right now, these were all things that were in our roadmap that helped us to accelerate them to help our restaurants get through the last couple of years. We've got about 500,000 square feet in the portfolio, for those of you wondering how big the portfolio is right now. But our focus is really shifting to international right now as we think about 2022 and beyond. And so that's something, as Michael had mentioned, is we're really gonna have to figure out how, local culture fits in with Toast culture. And this is where I'm so proud. You did a great job realizing that there are regional differences, global differences in what it means to be a toaster. And we're really leaning in on trying to figure that out right now. So Michael, you want to talk a little bit about kind of what that journey was all about in the last couple of years and kind of where we started and that holy smokes moment where we were like, we really have to figure this out. So I'll turn it over to you and let you talk about our journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as I mentioned, I've been at Toast for about 4 years now. We've definitely gone through a little bit of a roller coaster since then, both from a growth perspective as well as how we operate every day and how we're working with one another. One amazing thing about our culture is it's been super organic since day one. And a lot of the things that we've defined, who we are, how we talk about ourselves, the brand, our identity overall, has honestly been created internally, and both from our leaders as well as from toasters across the board. So there's really been this unbelievable melting pot of inspiration in how we've built the culture and who we are. And to Beth's point around our mission and how much we're focused on that, like to empower the restaurant community to delight their guests, do what they love and thrive is ingrained into every single one of us in a really awesome way. And we've created our operations in a way that it makes that mission top of mind for every decision that we make, everything that we do, whether it's cultural or something that we're focused on for our product. And it's been something that's really driven the passion and the culture for the organization overall in like an unbelievable way. We have a fun stat for us is that 68% of us came from the restaurant community prior to working for Toast. So that empathy for our customers and how we continue to drive things forward has always been, again, at the forefront of what we're doing. And I think has shown the passion and the involvement and how much fun it is, honestly, to work with one another every day because we're all super passionate about what we're doing. That journey and how it's continued to evolve. I mean, starting, I think I was like roughly 750 and coming up to about that 2,700 number that Beth mentioned in that 2019, early 2020 phase was a serious growth opportunity for all of us and how we thought about not only operating within our offices, working through how we were evolving our office spaces. And each day you came into the office and a different wall came down or whatever it may be, because we were expanding and we were continuing to grow and thrive in our space, but also how we continue to work with our field employees who are out at restaurants every single day and prospecting and working with our clients, as well as then our remote employees who are at home. Trying to evolve our technology, trying to evolve our practices so that we can think about where we're storing information, where we're keeping everyone going, how people can understand where to go to get the tools they need to be successful in their role. It was a challenge for us, and one that, to be honest, the pandemic sped up and gave us the opportunity to really think about how can we drive this forward. I think we all remember March of 2020 and the transition that we all had to take pretty quickly. I was actually still in my old field marketing role at this point in time, but joined a group of individuals on the people and workplace experience teams to what we called Awesomify, work from home, because we, again, were thinking this was going to be a 2 to 3 week phase at that point. I think we all were hoping that, but like on March 13th, we all went home. And that date, I feel like, will live in everyone's head for quite some time now. And so from day one, we immediately started thinking about how do we make this great? How do we take the awesome culture that we've built within our offices and ensure that that ripple effect and that it's echoing throughout our now virtual hallways? And that was our first focus area. How can we provide managers with the tools that they need to be effective in creating connections for their teams and making sure that people felt like they were ready and enabled to work from home? Because a lot of people weren't set up for that. And weren't ready for it. It's not even just about your desk and how you're set up for it, but it's that mentality now of being at home every day. And how can we make sure our managers are enabled to have those conversations and work through some of those really difficult times for our employees? And then we went right into the connectivity piece and the feel good. Within the first 2 weeks of being at home, we took what we used to do in our offices as open mic night and brought it virtually. And we hosted a virtual open mic night that Anyone could jump on, and this isn't karaoke. This is like, I think probably one of the most impressive things about our community of toasters is like, we could probably have like an American Idol contest going on, because like, holy cannoli, everyone is so talented. It's so inspiring and cool. And that was our first virtual thing that we did like that in a really big way, especially coming off of a massive in-person kickoff that we had just had a month prior with about 3,000 people at it. It was wild to see that transition, but how raw and authentic it was so inspiring, and to be quite honest, like in times a little emotional. But like our founder's kids were popping up, sitting on his lap as he was playing the guitar and singing a song, and like just like the elements of that just like really elevated who we are as a company and how we all continue to band together. And I think the cool thing to partner with this, to Beth's point on our product, is we all also knew that like while we were going through this challenge, our customers were. And to see our team band together to do that in such an amazing way, that weekend, I think it was March 18th to the 21st, there was about 75 of us that got together over those 5 days, including the weekend, to stand up rally for restaurants, which was a new opportunity to get money into the pockets of restaurants as they needed it, was restaurants were closing and they didn't know when they were going to open again. And we raised over $10 million on that platform that went directly to our restaurants within 4 weeks. And just seeing those 50 people literally sit down, of coders, marketers, literally anyone who wanted to step in and do it, it was just so inspiring and cool to be able to see that transition as we headed into that April timeframe.
Yeah, and I think, just to add on to what Michael's been talking, and I think this is a really important point. And I've been on both sides. I've come from mature companies that where every company has a culture, right? Every company does, and the culture at Toast. What struck me was, while a lot of other companies were trying to figure out, how do I get Wi-Fi? How do I get laptops? How do I get, desks at home for our employees? We were talking about, how do I awesomify work from home? And how do I get open mic? Because heaven forbid we miss open mic night, right? The other stuff we knew would come later, but I think it's so important it was so important for Toast. The reason we were able to keep that culture, keep that connectedness, keep, the energy that we had in our company, was because we went there first. It wasn't third or fourth down the list of priorities. We solved that before we solved how to get a work from home stipend and how to get a desk in everybody's home office. And as we were reflecting on this and thinking about it, of course that's what Toast would do, because that's who we are. When you're a company where the secret to your success has been so invested in a company culture where even our values, one team. And like Michael, as he was talking about, the all hands calls went from being all hands to be called one, because we reinforce this every single solitary opportunity that we get about how important culture is to who we are and to what we do. And as we started down that path of with our employees, because as you all I'm sure experienced, employees were asking, when are we opening up our offices? How long are we going to be home? When is this going to end? And part of what we did, I think, that was so powerful is, when we said we didn't know, we told people we don't know, right? We said we're going to find out the answers, but this is all part of what we're trying to figure out. And we came up with a set of guiding principles that we put in front of people. We said, as we go through this process, there are several things that are going to be really, really important. One, the health and wellness of our toasters comes first and above all else. So everything that we're going to be doing is going to be guided by that. Second of all, we are going to follow CDC and local and state and government protocols and requirements. And we followed that. And in a large, for many, many months, that served us really well. And it's part of the learning as we go into the future about how we've had to adjust. And finally, we're just going to follow the science, right? We are going to follow the science, and we're going to be really leaning in on all of that. And that transparency and that authentic way of dealing with this, I think, was really helpful, because we weren't necessarily the first to come out of the gate with our policies. And so we did it in a very thoughtful way, because we were gathering data and trying to make sure that we were doing the right things to those guiding principles. And we've all, some of you may be on the call where you've been part of those teams where people went out first and said, we're coming back in September of 2020, only to have to constantly retract. And I don't feel like we ever got into that space of having to constantly retract what we were doing, because we did it in a really thoughtful way and stayed true to our guiding principles. Although we did say over and over again that this will evolve, and it has. And we've said that from the very beginning, that, in many instances, we're all flying this airplane as we were building it. And so we've got to make sure that we reserve the right to change courses, to change our processes, to change our protocols. And we'll talk a little bit more in a few minutes about how we do this.
Yeah. I mean, Beth and Michael, it's a really interesting story, especially a really interesting story how the strength of a culture, and it sounds like the sort of mission driven component of the culture, really set you guys up in a pretty great way. Obviously, it wasn't a layup, and there was plenty to do, but it sounds like you guys made some really interesting decisions, and probably challenging decisions early on. I think in the focus on employee experience and the focus on maintaining culture. I can say from my seat, talking with organizations now, nearly 2 years into this, a lot of companies, likely more than we all expected, call it Q2, Q3 of 2020, they've seen tremendous productivity. And now what they're having to, in no small part because they did focus on some of those nuts and bolts issues that you mentioned, Beth, making sure that their people could be productive in a real tactical sense. But now, whether it's the great reshuffle, the great resignation, I think a lot of organizations are having to think really hard about how to both embed, to reify to a certain extent, or to shift their culture and make sure that there is a connection. You guys, at least from the jump, sounds like you were in a really great spot. I will say, sorry, go ahead, Michael.
Like that's actually an interesting piece there. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
No, not at all.
We did, unfortunately, like several other companies in early 2020, have to do a reduction in force. Specifically, of course, as we all know, restaurants were so impacted by this. So as was our business. And there was an unknown there, unfortunately. And so we actually, and this is public information, but we had to do about a 40 to 50% reduction in our staff. And so those 4 months coming out of starting in April, I think it was April 14th to be exact, I was part of the reduction in force. Those 4 months were tough for Toasters. And to be able to really think about what our culture was, especially again, coming out of that 3-day kickoff we did in Boston with 3,000 people at it. It's like our oorah moment for the year. And starting that out, it was tough. And it was really difficult for us to be able to say, like, who are we as a group and how do we bring that back? And so I started back at the company in about August of that year. And that's where a lot of that partnership between Beth and I and our teams came to be around how do we start bringing that culture back? How do we focus on that? How do we drive that connection between people and making even those subtle changes of transitioning our all hands to a one team meeting, focus on recognition and how we're driving that forward for folks. So we dove right back into it. We had a good foundation to start with, but we definitely had a bump in the road.
Yeah, as a lot of organizations did. Thanks for that, Michael. I mean, I guess where I was headed was, the sort of the chuckle way in is to say, we all maybe remember Zoom happy hours early on, and that they did hold a sort of sense of connection to the rest of an organization, but oftentimes those tapered off maybe pretty quickly, or at least the enjoyment that people were getting out of them. So my question is really about what sort of shifts and what sort of changes you had to make now looking, deep into 2020, into 2021. And maybe if you could talk a little bit about some of the mechanisms, I suspect, but I don't want to put words in your mouth, Michael, but kind of establishing a position looking after employee experience, even if that predated a little bit the pandemic itself, but really putting an emphasis and kind of money where the mouth is in terms of focusing on how important that is to the organization. So I guess the question is, great start, including bumps in the road, but how has the thinking about it developed over time? And now as you're sort of starting to grow again, looking at other geographies, but no doubt bringing new people in, how has that shifted over the last, call it 18 months?
Yeah, I mean, so Beth, if you don't mind, I want me to start and then pass it back. Great. As I came back into this role and kind of to your point, like kicked off this new adventure, it was really diving in to understand what was happening with our teams. I sit on the same team as our people success partners, or other companies would call them HRBPs, and really having that tight connection with them of understanding what's happening within the specific departments in those organizations, and then partnering that with our employee data that we do through our annual, and at that point in time, we're actually doing quarterly touch points through Culture Amp to understand what was happening with our employees, what's the direct feedback that we're getting, and how do we root that in data so that I can take a deep look at that and understand where we can then make an impact. So coming right out of it, I saw a question come through about orientation. That was one of the first things that we solved for. I was, I think, one of the first 20 people that came back as we started to rehire. And so we were ramping that up starting in August. And we had to think of the way to bring people in to drive that culture home for them every single day. So we built a 5-day orientation program that was 1 hour a day versus that 1 day, 9-hour course that everyone is so used to. But it was 5 days. We call it family meal. Family meal, if you're not familiar with the restaurant industry, is that time that the staff gets together to enjoy whatever the special is that night and get together before they start their shift and celebrate one another. And so we created that opportunity for toasters to make sure that they felt that connection to the restaurant industry right off the bat and that connection to our community. As that continued to develop, we went into the school year. We had to support our parents. We built a few new programs around how we could support our parents in a really big way and ensure that parents of croutons, or what we like to call them at Toast, how they could be supported through this unbelievable time. And then continuing to think about those transitions of launching, we launched a partnership with Airbnb experiences so that people could have those not just connection points with each other, but also those cultural connections back to different areas across the world. And of course, they got to expense their food and whatever pieces they had to bring in part of it, but could make Mexican street tacos as a team, or go and explore the hills of Scotland virtually, whatever it may be that was based on their interests. So it wasn't necessarily just about building those connections and what they were doing every day at work, but also their connections based on what they do to make them tick personally, and really making sure that we were bringing that to the forefront. That all has evolved as we continue to go through the year. I think 2020 for most of us was about surviving. As we're transitioning into 2021, it was all around how do we work better together. And as we go into 2022, it's all around how can we help toasters understand how they thrive. And how we've set ourselves up for that is a lot of the work that Beth and my team did on the Future of Work program, which of course is a super buzzy word, but something that we really took to heart. And understanding how can we create the best employee experience to ensure that no matter who you are or where you work as a toaster, you're going to thrive. So we did, I think we put a little bit of my marketing hat on to think about personas and how do we understand who these people are, what makes them tick. Beth's team did amazing work on like what their days look like, when they're in meetings, how they're commuting, how they're thinking about their collaboration time versus their solo work time. And how do we bring all of that together to then build the right program to help them work the best, but also the perks that can go along with that to ensure that they all feel that toasty connection. And how that all can be driven forward. So that was something that we launched at the beginning of the summer as we were starting to head into the idea of going back to the office. And then Beth, if you want to chat about what we did over the summer to bring people back.
It was so freaking cool.
So
the head of my workplace experience team came up with this idea of going back to school like you do for when you're going to college, and we called it summer orientation. And so part of what changed for us is when we left the office, everyone was in the office all the time. And we knew when we came back into the office, we were going into a hybrid work model where people were going to be coming in maybe 2 days a week, maybe 3 days a week, maybe 4 days a week. So we were completely transforming how people work. So over the pandemic, we delivered all this new space. We were in the midst of construction pre-pandemic. So we delivered new space, and we had to educate and build a whole change program around bringing people back into the office, into a new way of working, and keep that high level of workplace and employee experience that we'd had through the entire pre-pandemic culture for Toast. So what we did is we built a whole program around summer orientation, where we had 50 to 100 toasters come in for a 4-hour session. We celebrated the new space. Michael's team participated, my team participated, and we basically helped train and let toasters kick the tires on all the space before we came back into the office. Because we knew that the reason people were going to be coming into the office were very different. They weren't going to come in to do heads down time. They weren't going to come in to be on Zoom calls all day. They were going to come in to do and to celebrate our culture, which is to socialize with each other, to celebrate, to learn, and to connect. And so everything that all of the amenities and services, we also completely shifted. So our food and beverage program before was, like for so many other technology companies, free snacks, and we had all types of drinks on tap. But we knew the reason people were coming in would be to celebrate each other. And then we started a new program of integrating all of Toast customers into our food and beverage program. So now our food and beverage program is really centralized on event-driven activities around learning opportunities for our customers and being able to experience the food of our customers. And so all of this came out of the learnings through the pandemic about completely different reasons for toasters coming into the office and how to get them excited about this new way of working, which further supported the culture that we've had all along, which is just to elevate employee experience, elevate workplace experience through the process. And it's been a huge home run for us.
Totally. And I think one of our big things there was, I think we can all be honest about the fact that a lot of us were like an office first culture. And as we came back into it, there was a lot of rumblings. We like to listen and learn from our employees as often as we can. Feedback is a gift, as they say. And we continue to hear the concern of like, we're just going back to the office again. Everyone who's at remote or in the field, we're going to be second class citizens as part of all of this. We're not going to get the same experience. So we really, really focused on that, both in, again, the perks and the technology that we were now offering, and the best practices around how to host a meeting and how to drive connection. If you're in a meeting and there are 1 or 2 people who are on the TV, who is the person in the room who's an advocate for them, so that they know that, like, hey, there's someone on the TV, maybe they just came off mute. Oh, I'm sorry, Mike, do you have something that you wanted to add into the conversation? And ensuring that connection point so that people are enabled to do that as much as possible. So in the summer orientations, we trained the employees on that and understanding what their new working norms were and how they were going to drive those connections in a hybrid environment. And then similarly, we hosted a remote version of this for anyone who was remote, who wasn't going to be coming into the office on a regular basis, but understanding for them, how are you now going to interact with folks who are in the office and still participate in those connection points so that we can really ensure, again, that full community of no matter who you are or where you work, you are having an extraordinary employee experience while you're at Toast. And that's been a really dynamic partnership between our 2 teams.
Yep.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. And it certainly seems like the right ideal to put forward. I think it's a challenge that a lot of organizations are going to end up facing as we move toward a more hybrid environment, how to make sure that there is some sort of experience equity among or between those that may be in person or those that are remote. And it's interesting because I think it'll flip-flop a lot, right? In many cases, those that are involved in a virtual experience may actually potentially, just because they've been doing it for 2 years, have an easier time engaging. And then at other times, if there's a critical mass in the office, there's the risk of those being virtual, feeling a little left out. Great that you're tackling it with training early on. That seems really, really smart. I wonder, Beth, it sounds like you guys were in the precarious, although, always look to a challenge as an opportunity. You're in the precarious position of having space designed and ready to be delivered when all of this happened. I wonder if you can talk about any, it sounds like there were some sort of programming changes that went on in the space, but did you feel you had to, did you feel directed in terms of how any physical space changes might need to be carried out?
Yeah, it was one of the questions that a lot of our executives were asking me as we were delivering some of this space. Hey, do you need to do anything different to the space? The good news is because of Who Toasts, what our culture is all about, we were already leaning way in on collaboration and community spaces throughout the spaces that we were delivering. And Annie Drapo, our chief people officer, asked me, she says, Beth, do you need a whole bunch of capital to completely reconfigure the space? And I said, Annie, you can give me that if you want. I said, but I'm just going to be shooting darts at a dartboard. I don't know what I'm doing right now. And I said, I think it's a much more powerful move to, we've polled our employees through the process. And I'll be honest with you, at the beginning, when we polled them, nobody was ever coming back, right? 80% of our population said, I'm working at home forever, I'm never coming back.
Yeah.
And over the course of the last 2 years, we've seen that slightly tick up to, 60-40, 50-50, 40-60, where we know that our toasters are really wanting to come back into the office, but for different reasons.
Sure.
And so what we've decided to do as we open up our offices, we've invested quite heavily in technology to help us understand the behaviors of our toasters. And then we'll go back in and start making adjustments to our space. I mean, our culture is one, no, we don't have private offices. We have a lot of open collaboration and community spaces anyway. So it's just a matter of, how much individual to collaboration to community space, what does that ratio really look like in the future? And what's the point when we need to start adding space? And that's really what we're looking to through technology and sensors to try to figure out over the next 6 months, because it could be I need to take out all of my seats and just put a whole bunch more community spaces in or brainstorming spaces in, because that's the reason people come in. An interesting thing we discovered when we opened up offices at the very end of last year, the reason people were coming in, offsites exploded in the office. That was the single, and we had some days we had 300, 400, 500 people in the offices that were coming in because they were craving to be with each other and have in-person discussions. So I'm in the camp of believing that people will continue to come back into the offices, but they're going to come in to celebrate culture, to celebrate learning, to celebrate each other, and to help drive innovation and ideation in our company. It's those casual collisions that are very difficult to have when you have a remote, when you're 100% remote, that people are going to still want to do that. I mean, the reality is, we like each other. We want to be with each other.
Yeah.
And it's one of the things I love about Toast so much is that people are like, I can't wait to get back into the office and really connect with each other again.
Yeah, there's a bunch. I'm sorry, Mike. Go ahead, Michael.
I was going to say the amount of hugs that were happening across the board. Everyone was just like, bring it in.
Yeah.
I get it. That's really great. A number of really interesting things that at least relate to my world that you touched on. One is, I think, the shifting understanding about expectations. I talk with clients a lot these days about how, we're in a tough spot because it's difficult to predict the future. And I think on top of that, there's a really challenging dynamic going on between employees who want greater flexibility, but there's not a ton of pressure on them to really define that. Instead, there's pressure to say yes, no. And so when it's saying, yes, I want flexibility, they feel, I think, oftentimes like they have to have their elbows out. They need to defend that staunchly. And maybe there's a management on the other side, not necessarily at Toast, but in some organizations that say, we really want our people back in. What I expect will happen is this period of something like détente, where both groups are, hopefully once we emerge from this and return to something more like normal, both groups are sort of figuring out what that right balance is. And I fully expect, at least in a lot of organizations, a shift like you described, where if it was maybe at one point 100% of people saying they want to be flexible 100% of the time, that shifts as people feel like they're not having to defend something that may be taken away and are starting to realize the benefits of some of the connection, just in a different mode than it existed before. So certainly something I'm seeing in our field. The other thing that you touched on, which I think is so interesting, you mentioned sensors, but I think the importance of a kind of test and measure regime going forward, because really difficult to figure out how to plan space, especially when we're flying a little bit blind, when no sort of critical mass is back in the office right now. But the way forward has to be, let's figure out how people do need to use this space in the new, whatever the new environment is. So that seems really smart. We're running short on time. I did have one, and I see you, Sarah, popping in probably with a couple of questions of your own. I did want to talk a little bit about what learnings, if any, you're taking to some of the expansion and thinking about, if you're under some time pressure to think about space going forward in other locations, what learnings can you actually capitalize on? What needs to remain TBD going forward?
Yeah, just a couple of quick learnings, and I saw some of the questions in there were asking about some of the things that we're using. So we are still struggling with technology solutions. I'll be honest with you, I think it's lagging right now in supporting hybrid work. And because it's hard to replicate an in-person experience through technology. And so we're looking at a couple different solutions. Michael and I just met with a vendor last week to understand how do we elevate that technology experience to continue to promote engagement. And as Toast is continuing to expand. The good news is we're expanding right now. We're really focused on international, and Toast didn't have a presence there. So, we're using a lot of the future of work data coming out of our employees for them telling us how they're going to work, what their expectations about how frequently they're in the office, to come up with what this new capacity equation looks like. And it's a combination of what our employees are telling us, what we're seeing in the data in terms of utilization, and then also attendance and how people are coming into the office, and what spaces they're actually using, right? It's all of that. And we're gonna, we had hoped to go in with a post-occupancy survey. We're gonna do that as soon as we open up offices to understand what's working and what's not working with our employees. And that'll give us a lot of information to help advise on where and how we grow in the future.
So on behalf of the CoreNet, the Education Committee, I just wanted to thank you, Beth, Mike, and Michael for participating in this webinar. Great discussion. And as you said, Mike, there are a few questions in the Q&A that Jill and I are gonna go through. You both or all have sort of answered a few of them. I'm gonna skip around for a moment and just go back to around the culture question, because Michael, you did answer the training portion of a question. And so this particular question here is asking, how are newcomers brought into the culture? Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, of course. So as we look at onboarding as both the experience and the training elements. Onboarding is actually built as a partnership between my team and the learning and development team, so that we see like what are the tools that you need to be successful, but also our other measurement there is around that sense of belonging. So we do a 5-day, 30-day, and a 90-day survey on that to understand where those measurements fluctuate, so that we can really ensure, again, that we're taking that data-driven approach to how we're thinking about employee engagement. But we have several different activities for them throughout the week. Again, understanding our mission, how we drive that forward. We leverage video a lot in how we tell these stories. So pulling from examples from like last year, we hosted our first virtual kickoff event, which went really, really well and was actually probably better than some of our live ones previous. But we take a lot of those elements as like ways to show recaps, so people can see how the story has developed over time. So whether you've been here for 8 years, 2 years, 1 year, 4 months, you understand about where we came from and where we're going. And we make sure that that's like mission critical to week one. And then we find those opportunities to elevate how they can understand who we are. They get an unbelievable swag kit 5 days before they start that shows a lot about like what our communities or our ERGs are, understanding a little bit more about how we operate and how we think about things. We built a recipe book that goes through like a lot of our philosophies around that. So they get that. And then we also now have a cookbook separately that goes through actual recipes that toasters have built and has a little bit of their backstory of like why that recipe is so special to them, whether it's a family thing, whether it's like a good memory, whatever it may be. And all of those elements get brought to a new toaster within their first 30 days of starting so that they can really understand who we are and how we can really drive that forward. We also make sure all of our orientations are still live and they're not pre-recorded and they're not things that people just like go through a work stream on their own. We host those sessions together and make sure that there's a lot of dynamic engagement and conversation with our leaders to ensure that that transparency is seen across the board.
That's great. Thank you. And then the last two questions that are here are similar. Again, kind of going back to data. So again, I'm not sure if you have sensors in any of your new spaces. And if you do, what data have you found to be most useful that you're actually gathering? And again, along those same lines, what analytics do you look at to drive engagement at Toast?
Yeah, so there's a question. So we use a combination of density and XY sense. For those of you who don't know XY sense, I think they came out of, if I got this right, CRAVE, and they've done an amazing job. Their analytics, and we're not only focused on attendance, so how many people are coming in, but we're also focused on when they come in, where do they go? And Mark, I think you asked a question about, how do we measure, engagement? We do a lot of work in our culture amp surveys about, to try to understand what the pulse of the organization is and try to understand how engaged the population is. But we're really looking at the types of spaces that people use. And I'll tell you, the data that we saw through the end of the year was really focused on people weren't going to desks. They were going to be together, to be in our pub, to be in our coop, to be in some of our community areas where they wanted to be with each other. And so in the future, we hope to use some more of that data to really pinpoint the reasons people are coming in and try to really adjust our workplace around what our employees are saying, the reason they're coming in.
Great, thank you. And then we have just one more question. So reflecting on Beth's comment, has evolving virtual reality technology been explored as a solution to simulate the in-person experience?
We looked at it and I was not a fan. We explored it. It just, Michael, I think you've probably looked at some of it as well. It was not something that we felt simulated all the toastiness that we've already been able to create through some of the programs that you've heard about today.
Yeah, I would echo that statement. I feel like there's the in-office experience or the in-person experience, but then there's the culture and the toast piece. And unfortunately, that's not something that can be replicated in virtual reality right yet. Once we can crack that code, sure, let me try it. But we haven't necessarily gotten there yet.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. So we're just about at 1:01 now. So I just want to thank the panelists again for your time today and thank everyone else who popped on the webinar today. Again, this will be available for viewing. The recording will be available on our YouTube channel. Great, thank you everyone.
And Beth and Michael, thanks so much for a great conversation.